Have you ever sat in a room full of people absolutely losing their minds over a game and you just felt nothing? Not even a flicker of interest, and maybe someone turned to you and said, "What's wrong with you?" Well, what if nothing is wrong with you? What if your brain is actually doing something completely different, and understanding that difference will genuinely change how you see yourself and the sports fanatics around you? Let's start with the people who do care, because honestly, you kind of need to understand them first. Humans spent hundreds of thousands of years surviving in small groups. Your ancestors didn't make it alone. They made it because they belonged somewhere, and belonging meant everything. Sports essentially hijacked that ancient wiring. When someone watches their team play, their brain releases bonding chemicals, the same ones that make you feel connected to people you actually love. Their brain is not exaggerating for dramatic effect. It genuinely cannot fully tell the difference between your cousin and a quarterback wearing the right jersey color. And then there is the dopamine situation, which is honestly wild once you understand it. Every single play in a game delivers a tiny hit of anticipation. Will it work? Will it not? That uncertainty is the engine. Neuroscience research shows that unpredictable rewards are far more powerful than guaranteed ones. It is the same psychological mechanism behind why some people struggle to walk away from gambling. The not knowing is the hook. Sports fans are essentially receiving a continuous drip of that neurological anticipation for hours at a time. For brains wired to respond to that, it is genuinely compelling in a deep biological way. So where does that leave you if you just do not feel it? Here is something researchers have actually found worth paying attention to. Variations in how dopamine receptors function can influence how strongly someone responds to competitive spectator activities. In other words, your indifference might be partly written into your biology before you ever watched a single game. You were not choosing to be difficult. Your brain simply was not built to get that particular reward from watching strangers compete. There is also a psychological concept called basking in reflected glory. When a sports fan's team wins, notice the language they use. They say "we won," as in they personally participated in the victory somehow. When the team loses, suddenly it becomes "they lost." That pronoun shift is not random. It is a psychological mechanism where someone's self-esteem rises and falls with outcomes they had absolutely no hand in creating. People who do not follow sports tend to skip this entirely. Their sense of self stays more stable because it is not attached to something happening on a field hundreds of miles away. Now, here is a part that might surprise you. Sports fans actually score well on certain empathy measures. Following a team involves caring intensely about people you have never met, worrying about their injuries, celebrating their personal growth. That is a genuine form of emotional investment. But people who do not connect with sports are not less empathetic overall. They just send that capacity somewhere else. Research has found that people with low interest in sports tend to score higher in openness to experience and engagement with art, creativity, and ideas. The emotional bandwidth is there. It is just pointed in a different direction, and that redirection matters. Think about where you find your version of what sports fans call being in the moment. Maybe it is a film that completely absorbs you. Maybe it is getting lost in a creative problem or a conversation that goes somewhere unexpected. Psychologists who study peak experience describe these as flow states, moments of total absorption where time seems to behave differently. Those states are available through countless pathways. Sports is one. It is just not the only one. Here is something worth sitting with, though. For some people, the distance from sports culture was not entirely a natural preference. Sometimes it developed as a response to feeling excluded, to not being athletic, to being on the outside of a social world that seemed to demand a particular kind of enthusiasm as the price of admission. If that resonates, your relationship with sports might be less about neurology and more about history. And that is worth knowing about yourself. What often separates sports enthusiasts from non-enthusiasts is how each group makes meaning from narrative. Sports fans love the story, the underdog clawing back, the rival finally defeated, the dynasty crumbling. The outcome is uncertain and the drama is real. That is genuinely compelling storytelling with stakes. People who do not follow sports often look at the same scenario and think, Why would I emotionally invest in an outcome that has nothing to do with my actual life? Both reactions are completely rational. They just reflect different answers to the question of where meaning lives. One group finds it through watching, the other tends to find it through doing. People who skip sports fandom often report feeling more like active participants in their own experience rather than spectators of someone else's. That is not a criticism of sports fans. It is just a different orientation toward where you put your emotional presence. Researchers sometimes call this the difference between parasocial investment and direct engagement. Sports fans build real emotional connections with teams and athletes who will never know they exist. People who do not follow sports often prefer to invest in relationships and pursuits where their presence actually changes the outcome, where the reciprocity is real. Neither approach is superior. Both are strategies for meeting the same fundamental human needs: connection, meaning, excitement, and the feeling that something matters. The tools just look very different. So if you have ever felt slightly out of place, when everyone around you erupted over a final score and you were just waiting for the conversation to move on, here is what the psychology actually says. Your brain's reward pathways are calibrated differently. Your tribal instincts lean individualistic. Your empathy flows toward different channels. And your sense of who you are does not depend on what happens to a group of athletes you will never meet. You are not missing some essential human experience. You are having a different one. And if you find yourself quietly curious about how your brain works in other ways that set you apart, there is a lot more worth exploring. How introverts process information, why some people think in patterns others completely miss, what it means to experience the world with a little more internal noise than most. Keep watching because that territory gets genuinely fascinating.